So for those of you who don't know us, we're the Dysingers, and I'm the mom of 5. I've been homeschooling for a lot of years. We have 4 grown children, and our youngest, Caleb, is here somewhere. I'm afraid he's on his bike. But he's the only one we have at home still. So we're blessed to have him with us. So this morning I'm going to share sort of my journey, and I changed it to towards true education, because I can honestly say that that's my goal and that's where I'm headed, but I don't think any of us can say that we really even understand or that we have aspired or we have gotten there. True education is a journey. So it was the fall of 1998, I think, and our oldest was 7. And I kind of whisked her out the back door of our house, and she looked so sweet. I had made her a new dress, and she had a bag of books under her arm. And, you know, you just feel, wow, this is amazing. Like, now I have my first child who's going to be in school. And a few seconds later, I heard a little knock on the front door, and I went and opened it up, and I welcomed my first student. So I sent her out the back door as her mother, and I brought her in the front door as her teacher. That was kind of what I thought about school. So to really understand, though, I'd have to go way back to when I started school. I was the typical 5-year-old in kindergarten and 6-year-old in first grade. And somewhere there in first or second grade, I started having the idea that I wasn't as smart as the other kids. You know, the system doesn't mean to tell children that. It's just that the system is sort of like a factory where everybody goes in through the same door and is put on the same maybe conveyor belt and supposed to be at the same speed, and pretty soon there are ones who start dropping off. And I was one of those. I was the compliant, happy, easygoing child in the classroom. And you know the saying, I bet you know the saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, in the family and in the school. And I wasn't squeaky. I wasn't making trouble. I wasn't failing. I was just getting by. And so my educational experience went like that for year after year. I just was getting by. But reading, language, all of those things that for some kids are hard, were hard for me. And I very quickly started seeing myself as this kid who wasn't good at school. I bet some of you have that same experience, because there are very few actually who feel, wow, this is my thing. Very few children are like that. And so my family moved a lot. And so in the first 8 years of my education, I was in 4 different schools, or maybe 5. And so I can't blame the teachers. I was always sort of the new kid on the block. They probably hardly knew me. And before they could really do much to help me, I was off to either another classroom or to another school. And so, you know, this just goes on. And by the time I got to high school, I will definitely say that I have a determined spirit about me. So if I put my mind to do something, I'm going to really give it my all. In high school, I definitely put in time because, you know, you don't want to, well, you're just competing with your peers, right? It just builds into you this competitive spirit where you don't want to be the bottom. you know? So the academics were hard. In elementary school, I had also realized that I wasn't very athletic. I mean, I'd grown up with two brothers who were very athletic and a father who was a PE teacher. So, you know, I mean, what chance did I have? I was a girl and they called me Grace. I knew that meant that I was clumsy, but they didn't mean it. So anyway, in academy, I started to be involved with music. Now that became my love. Here was something that didn't seem to take a lot of effort for me. And, you know, I had started playing piano. That was hard, I will have to say. When I was little, my mom started me, and I wasn't ready, and I couldn't grasp it. But because I really wanted to learn, I kept at it. Same thing, they started me on flute. I love it. Today, it is still kind of my happy place, my place where I feel peaceful. Not that I'm any great musician, but, you know, something that would give me joy in life. And so in my academy years, I spent a lot of time. I was in the band, I was in the choir, I was in the touring choir, and the academics fit in wherever they could, and I really worked hard. And so I did fairly well in high school. Although, you know, you get to the SAT and the ACT, and they tell you that you aren't really so smart, even if you're doing well in school, maybe. You know, you have test anxiety, at least that was me, test anxiety. And so, you know, it's layered effects. And I think it's layered effects of insecurities that you face then in your later life when you're an adult. Or when you're parenting, all of a sudden things start to unravel in some way at some point if we base our security on what the educational system tells us about ourselves. It either tells us something that makes us feel very proud, or it tells us something that makes us feel very ashamed or insignificant or insecure. That's the problem when you have a system like that. Now, lest you think that I don't believe that the system can be good, the traditional educational system, it can. And I will say that for both my husband and I, it was a blessing in our lives. You know, there were things about it that were not a blessing, but given the life circumstances that we were both in, I think there's no doubt that it was something better for us. But just because it was something better for us didn't mean that it was the best, right? So we're on a journey. So I squeaked through elementary, college. College, I really started to enjoy learning. I met my husband at registration, my freshman year. I was 18. That changed my life for sure. I feel that John sort of had experienced true education in a way that I had not. Like, I hadn't even heard that word. I didn't even know anything about true education. But he had the privilege of going to one of Madison College's satellite schools. And so he had learned of the value of working and some of these things that, you know, I probably had not learned, but that was very intriguing to me. So in my college years, I started as a social work major. You know, I had realized that my heart was definitely towards people, and I wanted to do something in the line of work that would put me in contact with people and to be helping people. You know, interesting that my true goal was to be a wife and a mother, but there was nothing in my educational life that actually really prepared me for that goal. It was, I mean, I'm not the only woman who can say that, I know. I have a lot of peers who also can say that. And so that was kind of where we started. We married after my third year of college, and John finished, and he finished, and then we got married, and I finished my last year. So I was totally unprepared for really being a wife. I did the best I could. He ate a lot of oatmeal and boxed macaroni and ramen soup and terrible stuff like that. But isn't it wonderful that God just takes you right where you're at? And he doesn't make you feel bad. I mean, I don't even feel bad telling you that. That's just where I was. I was doing the best I knew. I was working 20 hours a week. I was taking 18 class hours that first year, which is huge, especially for someone who's not, the academics don't come super easy. So I was taking 15 hours of classwork, and then I was taking a 3-hour correspondence course. Plus I was a newlywed, and I was hard-headed. I even had a teacher who sat me down and said, Pam, life is too short. You can't do all of this. And I was so determined, I just said, well, I'm sure life isn't going to change. I just got to figure out how to make it work. And that's kind of the tenacity that I guess I've faced life with. It's like, no, we can make this work. So fortunately, my second semester was better. When I graduated, John and I had the privilege of going overseas, and we went to Maxwell Academy. And I will say, we were really starting maybe to understand. I was maybe starting to understand. I had changed my major to education, actually, after my first semester. My mom gave me some very wise counsel. And John and I were dating. He was in education. My parents were both teachers. My mom just said, honey, if you change to education and then you want to do social work, education will be the great bachelor's degree, and then you have to go get your master's for social work anyway, so just get it from that perspective. I thought, well, that was good counsel, so I did change to education. After I finished, though, we went overseas, and John was the chaplain, Bible teacher, boys dean, assistant dean, head of the grounds crew, whatever. That's people that work at this institution understand what that's like. And I was going to do, well, I didn't know what. I was not going to be teaching. I knew that. I was cataloging books in the library, which was challenging for me. I don't enjoy that kind of work. I was also cooking in the cafeteria. That is also not my thing. It was a time of testing for me. But after our first year there, they did need a teacher. And so the second year that we were at Maxwell, I became the elementary teacher. And I felt like now I'm going to be able to do what I wanted to do. And that was that there would be no lost children in my classroom. That I would teach children on more of an individual basis, and that I would make learning fun for kids. And that was my passion. And of course, we didn't have a lot of books there. We didn't have a lot of, looking back, I would do things very differently. But, I understood the value of a teacher coming alongside and being a friend and a mentor to their students. And so recess did not find me at my desk. Recess found me outside, being the pitcher or being whatever, kicking the ball or playing foursquare with them and binding hearts. I mean, that's really a key, whether you're a parent teacher or whether you're a teacher teacher. So it was at Maxwell Academy that we definitely started to see the fruits, I guess you would say, in a clearer way, the fruits of a broken system. And we were dealing with missionaries' children from all over Africa. And many of their parents were not, it wasn't just Americans, it was missionaries from the Philippines or missionaries from other parts of the world who'd come to Africa. So it was very much an international school. We loved it. We had an amazing experience there. But the thing that changed our lives was the brokenness that we saw in the young people. And I'm not going to say it was across the board, but I'm going to say it was a lot. It was the majority of young people. They were really suffering. And John spent evenings in the dorm counseling, and the stories that we heard, the hurt and the pain from missionaries' children. The parents were so given to the gospel that Mrs. White has a beautiful quote about neglecting the garden outside of your door. And that's what we saw happening. And we were young. I mean, I was 22 when we went, and we didn't have any children. And all of the staff there, were not our parents' age, but, they had children who were grown. And so, you don't have to judge, but when you start to parent, you want to look. What kind of fruit do you want in your children? And you start looking around for people who have the kind of fruit that you're looking for. Or in our case, young people who had the kind of fruit that we would hope our children to have. And it was not very many. And so that was very life-changing for us. The Lord started to call our hearts to something different. And I don't have time to go into all of that. So I just have to take the fast track. We left Africa after 6 years. We came as the two of us. We left as a family of 4. We went to Andrews University, where John got his master's in educational psychology. And then we moved to Centerville, Tennessee. And we began teaching in a one-room school. It was an ideal situation. The conference hired us as a teaching team. John would teach 51% of the time, and I could teach whatever I wanted or nothing. And we had great ideas that this was going to be a wonderful change for our family. We found a little house that was in walking distance from the school. This is perfect. I mean, the kids and I can walk to school. I can teach a class or two. John can come home with them. We just had this idea, this is going to be perfect. But 6 months later, after negotiating on this house, it all fell through. And just before school started, we decided we were going to build on his parents' land, which was 180 acres, about 25 minutes from the school. When we left Africa, we had 2 goals. Our burning goal was that we wanted to deepen our relationship with the Lord. We recognized that, it's not enough to know God. It's not enough to serve God. It's not enough to say you're a Christian. It's really a personal walk that the Lord was calling us to that we hadn't really experienced. And so we had been really gaining a deeper experience with the Lord. So that was going well. But the second goal was that we would have more time as a family, that we would have more time to mentor our children and to raise them together. And that was not happening. John would leave for school within minutes of our children waking up, and he would return at best 2 hours before bedtime, but most of the time it was maybe 30 minutes before. His days were long. The first year he had 3 children in 3 grades, and the second year we had 13 children in 6 grades. And the job satisfaction and everything was low. Parents and teachers were thrilled, but the teacher was dying inside. And John just felt like, this is not what I feel God really calling me to. So after much prayer and study, the Lord led us to leave our education jobs for what we did not know. And it took almost 2 years before the Lord opened up his plans for us. And those 2 years combined with, I want to say, the next 10 years were truly our wilderness experience, where we really learned about true education and we really learned about the Lord. So I don't have time really to go into all of that, but God is good and he is faithful. If you will seek him with your whole heart, he's promised you will find him. So in the remaining time that I have, thank you. We're going to talk about 3 things. Number 1, what is true education? Number 2, what about school? And number 3, I'm just going to share with you some practical tips that we learned and we have applied. So I'm going to... Yeah, that's where I'm supposed to be. Okay, so here's the first quote I want to share. I'm not going to share a lot of quotes, but this is one that does not even use the word true education, but it uses the word heaven appointed. So this is my favorite educational quote. Speaking of Jesus' education, his education was gained directly from the heaven appointed sources. Now that should have our attention. Heaven appointed sources. From useful work, from the study of the scriptures and of nature, and from the experiences of life, God's lesson books full of instruction to all who bring to them the willing hand, the seeing eye, and the understanding heart. How many of you are familiar with that quote? Oh, I'd love to see all of your hands. But now you can all say you're familiar with that quote. So heaven appointed education. Interesting, isn't it? We could talk a lot about what we don't see in those, but I'm going to just choose to talk about what we do see. Okay, so the first thing is useful work. And I'm going to ask you, what useful work do you have your children doing? Do you have useful work for them? You know, children understand what is busy work and what is just occupying their time and what is really useful, or I would say even necessary work. You know, for us, it was agriculture. By this time, we were farming for a living. And so the blessing there is that there's no end. I'm telling you, there's never an end to farm work. Never. It never ends. It's sort of like dishes. Like, the only way it ends is if maybe, it doesn't end. It's not like dishes. You can at least stop eating. And no, it never ends. The grass is always growing. The weeds are always growing. There's always work that needs to be done. Now, you, most likely, none of you here are market gardeners. But what I really want to help you to see, and I know that John will be talking about it, and I'll be talking about it more tomorrow, is that gardening, or what we call an agrarian life, is the Adventist life. This is a missing piece in Adventism today. The agrarian life should be a mark of the Adventist life. It's a way of life. It's not, you don't put out your garden in the spring. No, we should be having a garden year round. It's a way of life. It's a part of preparing. It is inseparable from true education. You cannot separate true education from agriculture. They're like twin sisters. So I'm going to speak to you about an agrarian life. In an agrarian life, your children always have useful labor. There's always useful work, things that they can be doing. You can have them starting a business. If you are market gardening like us, you have a captive audience, and your children can sell all kinds of things. So, useful work. The next one is the study of the scriptures. Worship is the best place that's going to happen. Or your personal devotions. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I'm going to say that just like an agrarian life should be a part of an Adventist life, morning and evening worship should be a part of every family's experience. I mean, unfortunately, I did not grow up in a family. We did not have morning worship or evening worship. On the weekends, we brought in the Sabbath and we closed the Sabbath, but that's really all I remember. And my parents were good Adventists. It's not like I don't fault them. I just think there was some missing piece there. But now we really have to remind ourselves that this is important. I could list for you a long list of things that we did with our children in worships. One thing we did when they were little is John decided that he was going to read the children all the stories of the Bible. We started in Genesis, and we didn't read any genealogies, we just took the stories, all the stories of the Bible. You know, fathers, if it's not your habit to be leading out in worship, I just want to challenge you. It's God's part of your job description, really. It's really an important, and so many times wives usurp that position. Maybe they're better readers. No, it doesn't matter. Dads need to be leading their family wherever possible. Now, if dad doesn't feel the calling and isn't going to do it, then yes, moms, by all means, pick up the slack. But it's a very important, if your life is too busy to have family worship, then you need to really look at that. What can you change about your life or your family's schedule or something? So, the study of nature. So oops, that's gotten me the wrong way. Is it? Okay, study of nature. There we go. You know, you don't even have to, I used to feel bad that I didn't plan more, I didn't know more, but if you place your children in a place where they can be in tune with nature, I mean, you don't have to really teach them even. They sort of teach themselves. They're not afraid to touch. Okay, so, you know, moms are there. Oh, no, don't touch that. It might sting you. Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably not going to have a deadly sting. They're going to learn something from that. Oh, those kind of caterpillars sting. I better not touch those in the future. But all caterpillars don't sting. So, you know, just letting them put their hands in it. You know, the top one, that's Caleb with a worm. You know, he'd been out in the garden, and children, it's exciting to find worms. The one under that, I don't know if you can see, those hands are full of frog eggs. We have an amazing, children, you love this. At our farm, we have a big pond, and every spring, we can hear when are they frogs or toads? Toads, see, my kids could tell you. Toads, the American toad, they all come to our pond by the thousands. It's an amazing educational experience. And so they're there for a very short time. And the males the females are laying eggs, the males fertilize those eggs, and the children literally could just go along the edges of the pond. The toads are everywhere, and they could just reach their hands in and they could pick them up. They're oblivious. The toads are in la la land at that point, and you just pick up those toads and they'll ribbit, use big old whatever. And it's amazing. And then you can hold the eggs, you know, and then a couple of weeks later we go to the pond and now there's all these tiny little tadpoles. The observing, just from observing, the things that your children can learn are amazing. I'm always amazed at what my kids know about nature. Okay, I've got to hurry. Experiences of life. These are all experiences we had this year that we learned from. They were all kind of bad experiences. Our pond, which is about a 4-acre irrigation pond, drained to a small puddle. And that was a real trial for us because that's how we irrigate all our crops. We had spring storms that came in. At the top right, you'll see we had 4 of our structures that were very much damaged in spring storms. The bottom, children, do any of you know what that is? Can you see that little house? Do you see anything funny about it? It has wheels on it, and are the wheels on the ground? No, the wheels are in the sky. So we had a strong wind. You can imagine it was very strong. That little house had about 200 hens in it, and it went upside down, and those hens went flying. Now, experiences of life teach us a lot, and I don't have time to share with you all the lessons that we learned. But those 4 things are God's lesson books, full of instruction to all who bring to them the willing hand. So we have to come with a willing hand, the seeing eye, and the understanding heart. So those seem pretty easy, don't they? It's not hard to study nature and the Bible and have useful labor and what was the last one? Oh, the experiences of life. Those seem very manageable, don't they? Sometimes when we think about school and homeschooling, it all seems so unmanageable. Like, how can you do it all? How do you cover all the bases? How do you get it all done? So, what about school? In my mind, school is a building. It's 4 walls. It's desks. It's books. It's workbooks. To me, when I say school, it represents the education that your children have to have. It's the education in reading. Everyone has to learn to read. If you have a child that is not a good reader, don't let their education be finished until you have conquered that. It can be conquered. I don't care what the problem is. Reading can be conquered. Is that child going to be maybe the greatest reader? No, but they need to get to the place where they're comfortable reading in public. They need to get to the place where the Bible and the spirit of prophecy, these things are manageable. There's so many adults. I know myself, adults who did not master reading, and it handicaps you for your life. It's so important. So reading, that's school. You don't get that from your tomato plants. You don't learn to read any place but with a book. But that's my last born with the book in the garden. Hey, if you have to read, you don't always have to read in the confines of 4 walls. Take it outside. Writing. Writing is a must-have skill. Your children's education is not complete unless you teach them to express themselves well in the written word. So that's school. You might find content for writing someplace outside of the confines of the walls of your house or a school building, but that's school. Reading and writing. Guess what's next? Arithmetic. Now, this is one I will say doesn't have to happen even in a book. It's interesting that our last born was quite proficient in mathematical calculating in his head. But when it came to really getting it in on paper, that was a totally different thing. And that was difficult. And I'd say to him sometimes, son, you know how to do this. And I'd give him a story problem. Most kids cannot do story problems. But if math is learned in the context of life, then that's how they know it, a story problem. Oh yeah, I can do that. So then transferring that to the page, that was where we had some challenge. But if you err, wouldn't it be better to err on usable math? Like that, yeah, that's where you want to err. If you're going to err, you want to err on the practical. So that's what I call school. It has to happen. Shame on us homeschooling moms if we shirk those must-haves, because we will handicap our children. So must-haves. Children, cooperate with your moms in these areas. You know what? I bet that some of you haven't yet learned that if you will just have the right frame of mind, it can just be done quick, quick, quick. So here's my next one. Reading, writing, arithmetic as quickly as possible each day. Get it done fast. And moms, don't bog them down with all the other things. I mean, I'll tell you some of those things in the practical tips. So, those are the things that you have to do. It's best done pretty much in books. They need your attention. They need you to be able to focus with them for those basic things. And when I say every day, I'm telling you, I would have that in my mind. Okay, we're having school today. And my husband would say, honey, I've got to have your help on the farm. No, we're going to have school today. And so for me, and I'm just going to say, for you too, there are other things that are even more important than those things. And so let's not hold so tenaciously to those things that when something else is more necessary, so we pretty much did school year round. In the summer, there's times where we really can't do any book work, but for the most part, we were sort of doing a little bit all the time. Okay, the last one, just some practical tips, things that we learned in educating our 5, who were all very different, but very similar in other ways. And I think the reality is most kids, there are certain things that are very helpful and they need. And one is that to live by a schedule. A scheduled life is a productive life. It's an efficient life. God can use you. Now, I love the quote. I believe it's in Christ Object Lessons where she says, you make your plans and then you lay them before the feet of the Lord to be given up or executed. So I've had to give up my plans many a day. And maybe that's my true education, right? Learning to trust God. So when I say live a scheduled life, don't be a hyper-schedulist. Don't be like, oh, you're 2 minutes late. No, because child rearing is your priority, and that often, unfortunately, throws your schedule off. Dealing with the will of a child, dealing with a difficulty with a child can often put your schedule on its ear. But hey, let me give you one quick tip here. Dealing with the will of a child. If you live where you can just send them outside, and especially if their father is outside, I would send a note. They couldn't read. I'd send a note to my husband, work them until they're happy. Don't send them back until their attitude is changed. And when he wasn't there, then I would do this. Okay, go outside and up and down the steps. We live on the 2nd floor, 5 times. Down, up 1, down, up 2, or run up to the pond road and back. It's amazing what a little exercise, a little fresh air, a little whatever can do to their attitude and yours too. A little break. So I'm going to say a practical tip is live an agrarian life. Garden year-round. If that's intimidating to you, don't let it be. Get Elliot Coleman's book, 4-Season Harvest. It's an amazing book to read, and it gives so many insights. He did it in Maine. We can do it in this in this climate. It can be. Our farm is in full production right now, and our customers love it. 4-Season Harvest. Model a love for learning. This is for parents. Model a love for learning. What do your children see you do as an education or learning? Do you share with them, oh, this is what I learned today? That might be in your devotions, or that might be, we live in a day and age where there's all kinds of ways to learn. And there's a mix of good and bad, but there's all kinds of podcasts. There's all kinds of sermons. There's all kinds of YouTube. There's all, parents, let your children see that you have a love for learning and make that learning evident to them. I mean, for me, I love to learn. Whether I'm in a sermon or any place, I'm taking notes. That's number one. That's my love for learning, which I didn't get from my education. I got from my true education. That I have a love for learning. And so I take notes. It's not just because I want to remember, it's because my mind is very active. And I'm one who, if I'm just sitting there listening, it can go right in and right out, and I can walk out the back door and not recall one thing I heard because my mind was busy on other things. And so for me, it helps me to rein my mind in and to discipline my mind. But even that says to my children, I do this because I know my weakness. Okay, don't hide your weakness. I have a weakness. If I'm not focused, if I'm not doing something to focus, my mind is on something else. And so model a love for learning, and your children will pick that up. Make learning a way of life. You know, in our family, I'm wondering, oh, there's the lost picture. That's our family doing maple syrup. Our boys wanted to tap trees and do maple syrup, and we're thinking, oh man, we live in Tennessee, the sap isn't sweet enough. But no, they wanted to do it, and we said, okay. So we got some books on maple syrup, and our two oldest boys became the Sticky Brothers, and they had a great following for their syrup, and it was amazingly good. And we had many learning experiences doing maple syrup and collecting sap and not tending to it quickly and it spoiling and sitting all night cooking it down. And we didn't let them we were there with them. That's how learning happens the best. Live life. Make learning a way of life. For us, we have a map of the world in our dining room. And whenever we're talking about some part of the world or we hear something, it's right there. I can't tell you how many times somebody will get up from the table and go look at the map. Oh, that's where Cambodia is, or that, so that's just social studies. You don't even have to, it's just happening all the time. Another thing that we do, my husband is good at this and we've all learned from him, is that words, we don't ever do vocabulary in our house. Anytime we're reading and we come across a word that somebody doesn't know, we might even know it, but we go to the dictionary and we read the definition right there. They've just heard the word used in a context, and now we're going to learn what that word means. I mean, that happens almost daily at our house, and I don't think that's going to change just when our kids, we don't have Caleb, or, we're always learning and we're always wanting to have better understanding of the English language. So there's so many ways that you can let that just be a springboard. Make your life a learning experience. And then read. We have read dozens of books as a family. Don't let that practice end when your children start to read themselves. We have interns, and we even do this with our interns. In the 6 months that we just finished an internship the end of August, we read at least 2 books when we're driving to church or when we're, and we usually pick something that is educational. We just read the book Bruchko. If you've not read that book, that's an amazing book about a young man who went to the Modelone Indians at a very young age to be a witness for Christ. So they're learning about the culture of another place. They're learning about serving the Lord. They're learning about the trials that life bring. And, it's so much more fun to learn it from a book, and so much more fun when families experience books together. So we did a lot of reading. I'll leave you with this one quote. "The end of all true education is expressed in the words of Christ. This is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. John 17:3. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for the privilege that we have to learn, for the way that you long to teach us. Every day you have things that you want to teach us, and we just pray that we would be learners in your school, and that we would teach our children the joy of learning and the reality that life is really all about learning. We're going to be learning for all of eternity, things that are going to just captivate and amaze our minds. And so, Lord, I just pray that we would start that now, and that the things that would occupy our minds would be things that would truly be a blessing to us, not only in this life, but that would prepare us for the life to come. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.